Army, but I know that they worked on planes, and I don't think that the U.S. Army has planes. So that's why I was thinking it was Air Force. But what I sort of remember him telling me was that his dad was Army. But he grew up in England on a base, like a United States. Well, he grew up in England, and then his family, his mom and dad, both worked on planes on a base that was stationed in England. And this was, one of the individuals that I was reporting because he had assaulted me. So I reported a judge, like something about a judge, but also about something about being assaulted. So then I had a hotel at first, and I made this horrible mistake of introducing myself to somebody who was staying at also staying at the hotel in a different room. And even though I want to clarify that even though I've talked about different men that I stayed with on the East Coast and in Blaine or Birch Bay or, all these different places, most of the time I was sleeping on the floor, and in almost every situation, I did end up having to stay with different people, a lot of different people. But in almost every situation, I was not having intimate relations with those men. So there were far more men that I did not have anything to do with and who did not take advantage of me in any way. Then there were people that I was intimate with because I was, and as soon as I had money of my own and had enough money of my own and could afford my own apartment, I was paying for my own apartment. And that's when I paid for the high-rise in Arlington, Virginia with my own money that I had earned as a server in restaurants. So when I bring up some of these different situations, makes it sound like I was with one person and the other, and then if I don't describe anything, it sounds like, I guess it leaves room for the imagination, but so that you don't have to imagine. Just know that I'm really tired of this video camera getting blurry too because it's unnecessary. But rather than imagine all of these things and having room in the imagination to wonder, all I can say is that there was nothing with anybody else. I mean, if I left, if I didn't go into a lot of detail about somebody that I was staying with, it's because nothing happened with them. Because typically, the only times that something did happen is if it was after I was incapacitated, which is why I say I've been gang raped essentially by people who are employees of the federal government, and they have known each other. Most of them have known each other. So if it wasn't, being gang raped from one to another, few individuals, when I was incapacitated, literally, I mean, with that being the first time that they ever tried anything after I was incapacitated. The other times and other situations where I stayed with people, there was nothing intimate going on, and nobody ever tried. If I ever had something to drink, they either didn't try anything, or there was no drinking or incapacitation. I mean, there were times when I had like a little bit to drink and wasn't incapacitated. Just because you have a half of a glass of wine or something doesn't mean that you're incapacitated. But the times when I was being targeted, I was incapacitated. So anyway, but in this next situation, where I met this person at the hotel in Wenatchee. I talked with him, and I was trying to get everything, put everything together. He had, I believe he had a guitar. So I was interested in playing the guitar a little bit. And then he brought over either wine, either it was red wine or another kind of liquor, and I believe that it was red wine. And I went ahead and had something to drink with him, but I had never given him the impression that I would do anything with him intimately. And it was another situation where, in that specific instance, I can't remember exactly how much I drank. I mean, for different situations, I remember exactly how many drinks I had, what they were, and everything, possibly because, they're coming from the bar. So I just can remember more easily how many times I was picking up a drink or getting a drink, someone was giving me a drink, that kind of thing. And what it was when somebody asked me what I wanted. With this red wine, and the person's name was Chris Dabney. Or not Chris Dabney. That's Post Pub. He told me his name is Chris Rozzolo, but I don't know if that is really his name. Because later I thought about it, and different people have said they hadn't heard anybody by that name, but other people acted like they had. And he was connected with the U.S. Army. He was United States Army. He did underwater diving for the federal government. And I had a feeling that he was somehow connected to just police, like regular police. Not maybe FBI or CIA or something like that, but I had the feeling that he was more of a police type of a person. But I thought about that later, and I didn't know at the time. And I had not, it had been over 3 months or so since my ex had left. So, I asked him to leave, and Alvaro. And instead of going to a hotel, he took off and went to Seattle, and then I think from there he went to the East Coast. And I really don't know where he went, because he said one thing, but he could have been anywhere, and I would just have to accept what he was saying, or question what he was saying, telling me. And and I just remember that I had a bad feeling about it. I knew that I should not be there. And anyway, I was intimate with him. And then after I was intoxicated the first time, then I guess I just threw in the towel in a sense, and I was for a couple of days. But then, and I think it was just probably shock and stress. I'd just been assaulted and had all these things happen to me in Seattle, and I don't think I was thinking clearly. And then it was definitely the first couple of times I was with him, I was incapacitated. And I remember thinking, he really doesn't care about me because he's trying to get me to smoke cigarettes. Actually, now that I remember this, I met him before the Seattle thing. So it was right before Seattle, because that's how I started smoking. I started smoking after I met Chris Rozzolo. And he wanted me, And anyway, it was about 2 months after the time that I met him, so I was just with this one person, and I regretted it. I felt like it was a mistake. And I remember that he acted like, oh no, wait, this is still not. No, okay, I take it back. I started smoking when I was at that house with the 3 different guys. So I am correct in that I met Chris Rizzolo after Seattle. So I was really stressed out, and then he gave me cigarettes, and then this other thing happened, and I just remembered that I regretted it. And then I also noticed that then when it looked like I might have a failure to appear again, after I had just remedied that failure to appear by getting out of Seattle and showing up in town, I had accidentally spaced it for some reason, and I had to quash a warrant, which it was not really that big of a deal, but I didn't know anybody who could help me. And then when I really knew that Chris Rizzolo did not care about me at all, and he was my enemy and my son's enemy, was when I was trying to find somebody to help me, and I could tell that he was happy with the idea that I was going to go to jail. He was really glad. I don't know how to describe it, but it was just all over his face, all over his expression. I could tell that he was glad I was going with the idea I was going to jail. And all I knew about him is that he said he was from Florida. And I know that when I was at his hotel room, I went and looked outside of the door for some reason, and all of a sudden this plane, like a military plane, turned on its lights and then came over the cliff, basically just at the same time that I went to the door and looked over. I guess because I sensed there was something over there. But it was all the way across, it was across the river, and it was nighttime. And I looked over there, and it wasn't like an airport that it was taking off from. It was some other port somewhere, or landing pad. And this airplane basically took off as I looked out the side of the door. And I just know that at that point I thought, okay, this guy is kind of acting like he's police. I definitely know he told me that he's involved with the U.S. Army in some way. He had all of his scuba gear with him, so he did scuba diving. And I thought that he had said he did some kind of scuba diving for the federal government. And in general, I just had a weird feeling about it. And then I noticed all the police in town. The police, after I was with him this one time, after I was incapacitated, I noticed that the police in town were acting like they thought that was really great. Like, yeah. And I then was like, okay, he's one of them. After I saw how the police and the guards in the town were acting, I knew that this Chris Rizzolo was one of them. And so I think he still wanted to be with me, and I didn't. I actually I didn't continue to do anything with him. He called me a few times, wanted to go out and that kind of thing. I went out with him one time. I needed a ride to a certain place, but I didn't do anything else with him. And then I wouldn't kiss him, and he said, "What are you, a whore?" He really was just kind of degrading me. But the main thing, I guess, that bothered me was that he had said, it was that I could tell he was happy with the idea I might go to jail. And then at the very last minute, I was able to get a hold of a really old friend from high school, and I asked him to please help me so I wasn't in jail and didn't miss visits with my son. And he understood that it wasn't because I'd done anything wrong, but it was just like a way to get bailed out and continue to go to these visits for my son and continue going to the hearings. And I definitely made a mistake with, this person from the hotel that I met. in even approaching him. But I don't really